G'day and welcome to Market Sam After Work. Today I want to do a video on barrel length and I suppose a little bit of a tiny bit of a guide without getting too involved, but a little bit of clearing up some of the thoughts that might go with barrel length. What I have in front of us is my TRG that's just about been through its transformation. I'll put more information on and do a shoot with this one as soon as it stops raining around here. It's on here also because it's just gone from having a just over 27-inch barrel to a just over 29-inch barrel, so it probably works in the conversation down the track too. I suppose where we start from, the barrel length side of things, we get quite a few questions at what barrel length I should get, and there's also a little of a thought of a longer barrel is more accurate, and in some cases a shorter barrel is more accurate. And I suppose I'll try and break that down a little bit. The fundamentals of this situation is when a lot of people look at things, the faster you can get a projectile going, the more accurate it's going to be. There's a logic to it, but it isn't all as simple as that. That logic is that the less time it's in the air, the flatter trajectory, the less bullet drop, the less wind drift or push by the wind it gets, or all changes to how fast that actually travels. And yes, in the simple engineering, that's the simple bit of it. The closer to the laser beam, it's going to do that. Doesn't actually work that quite that way because it is a firearm. And what I mean by that is a firearm is actually a dynamic thing. It isn't a laser beam. It isn't something you point, you press the trigger and it goes over there. You point, you press the trigger, and then the dynamics start. The moment the projectile starts scooting off in this direction, the rifle starts moving in this direction. If you had those two things working perfectly equally and opposite, so the rifle traveled perfectly straight backwards and that made the barrel stay perfectly still apart from a direct transverse movement to where the projectile is traveling, then that would be fine. What actually happens is a lot more happens. It's pushing against a human. The rifle is generally moving around in some form or other than just straight. So recoil management and all that sort of stuff's involved. But the thing is, regardless of how much you control that, there is movement. There is, whether it's harmonics or shock or recoil or muzzle lift or whatever, there is movement. So that means the more time that a projectile is in the barrel, the more movement is happening to the barrel, so the less accurate the end result is. Because it's moving off target a little bit. In little places it's moving a tiny bit off where it is exactly pointing. And transversely, or oppositely, the shorter the barrel, the less time the bullet's in the barrel, the projectile's in the barrel, the less movement the barrel, or less influence the barrel has over the bullets or the projectile's trajectory. So that's quite a big one when you think about it. When you look at some of the big stuff with 40-inch barrels and things like that, one of the biggest issues actually dealing with, yes, they're getting awesome speed. So the mathematical accuracy of that bullet, how fast it's traveling through the air and how little bullet drops and how little the wind gets to push it because of the time it's in the air is awesome. The problem is the time it's spent in the barrel is probably where it went from awesome to not so awesome because the groups opened up because it's sitting in that barrel for that long. So that's answerable in fashions, you know, the bigger, heavier rifles and the more work in all those bits and pieces, it's answerable to a degree, but it's still one of the factors that's going on. And it comes right back down to a little 22. They used to make 22s with 28-inch barrels and things like that, that in very skilled hands, they could shoot very accurately. No real advantages for having that longer barrel anyway, apart from iron sights and your sight radius type thing, but no real advantages, but they could still shoot well, but largely they didn't shoot well. Largely it's exactly the place where people don't shoot accurately, and really a 12-inch 22 is a lot easier to use because that same thing, the projectile time in the barrel. So I suppose what I'm trying to say with that is you want to try an efficiency point, but longer isn't necessarily better. As for those efficiency points, yes, you are after time where you get to burn all your powder properly. And then that depends on all sorts of details. The rough details I work with is when you're looking at the 20 to 25 or 20 to 30 grains, maybe 15 to 30 grains of powder, then somewhere in the 20 to 22 inches, maybe 24 inches, and then some stuff you'll get a little bit longer, but around that 22 inches, 20 to 22 inches is where I tend to find that's where they're efficient. There's all details about bore size and powders and that sort of stuff, but that's the sort of sizes that work really well. 24 inches, 223 shoots really, really well, does everything really nicely. You come up into around the 40 grains of powder, so whether that's the 243, that's the 6.5 Creedmoor, the 6mm Creedmoor, the 308, the 260 Remington, around the 40 grains of powder, so probably 35 to 45, 50 grains of powder, around the 26, maybe 27, as little as 24. Somewhere in that bracket, you're going to find something that works really well. And it's going to be as efficient as it can be without any negatives attached to it. I've recently been through that of a 243 running a 31-inch barrel, pulled that back down to a 26-inch barrel. It shot faster. It went faster with a 26-inch barrel than it did with a 31-inch barrel. Bigger isn't always better. Anyway, moving on, you move up into that 70 grains of powder, around the 70 grains of powder, you're moving into where 26 works well, but 27s and 28s start to come into the fray of what works nicely. And then you're moving into the 80, 90 grains of powder, 100 grains of powder. It starts to get into the bigger projectiles, and you start to move into where 26 is sort of the minimum, and 27, 28, 29, 30 inches, all sort of works. And then you'll get into some of the big stuff. There's BMGs, most of the BMG rounds set for the actual machine gun, and what it was running with, I think, was a 45-inch barrel is where its speeds come from. But very slow burning powder, very big projectile, so lots of power going on. And there's sort of a blend in between. That's where I'd come back to in the machine gun, they're shooting them out there. It's got a group it's trying to do. It is not pinpoint accuracy. And you'll tend to find that unless you do a lot of work with a rifle with such a long barrel, you tend to find that the accuracy, and you'll see this in your 416s, you'll see this in the 375s, you'll see this where if you look at the closer groups, they're not as accurate as you might think. Now, it doesn't mean that the bullet, the round, the barrel aren't very capable of that, but in a rifle format, which means it's not a machine, it's actually something that's being shot, there is a fair bit going on when you pull that trigger. And with lots of recoil, there's lots of subtle movements which tends to open up the group. The projectile will still travel very well through the air, but where it was released is probably a little tiny bit. There's a 1 or 2 or 3 MOA of bullet release that's actually going on rather than about the bullet trajectory. So I suppose that's a rough idea. That's a bit of the logic going with it. Those are sort of the numbers that I roughly work with. I suppose the other number that I really work with is what I can get, and the ergonomics of it. Longer isn't always better when it comes to fitting in the gun safe, or it comes to fitting in the gun room, or sorry, the gun case when you're carrying around the gun bag, all that sort of stuff. And is that extra, roughly 30 feet per second per inch? Is that worth it for the awkwardness of dealing with it? You might have a 300 Win mag that you have the choice of a 26-inch thing, 26-inch barrel set up, ready to go. It'll still perform very well. And you could go to a 28 or a 29-inch barrel and you could make it perform better. But all of a sudden it doesn't fit in anything. Or all of a sudden you've gone from this barrel that was a $300 barrel to this barrel that's a $700 barrel. It's something that you have to make sense of to suit you. And performance isn't everything. That little bit, if it's coming down to winning the world championship, okay, you're looking for every little bit. If it's come down for shooting at the local range, if it's come down to the fun shooting, whether it's local competition or whatever, really that little detail is a very small one. Your abilities, your ability to read the conditions, your loading, all that sort of stuff is going to be more the winning factor than that 1 or 2 inches on the end of it. Now, if there's no negatives to it, hey, go with that extra bit. If there is, all of a sudden you've got to change everything, it doesn't fit everything, it's a big pain in the butt, then I don't think it's worth it. The weight of the barrel, yes, that's relevant for what you're doing, which isn't always bigger is better. Once again, it's a hunting rifle and a 20-inch 270 Winchester, where the sporter barrel still performs really well, even with such a short barrel for a decent amount of powder, still performs really well, and the weight balance of some of those guns are awesome. So then shot off the shoulder, all of a sudden that becomes a really, really efficient round for what it is. Does it compete with a 27-inch heavy barrel for extreme long range? Of course it doesn't. It's not that rifle, but it still does its job very thoroughly. So listen, I suppose that's fairly general. I've given some numbers in there as to rough ideas, but really I'd put everything else into that decision as to what's just as important. And being that little bit longer, it isn't as important as some might consider. But certainly when it comes to accuracy, there's more involved than the maths of the equation. There is the whole equation, and that, well, like I said, factor all those thoughts in. Anyway, guys, hope that makes some sense. Thanks for checking in, and we'll catch you next time.